Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome back. You're listening to the Coast to Coast podcast here on Inside Carolina, InsideCarolina.com. I'm your host, Joey Powell. I see that the fruit snacks have been devoured, which means Sherrell McMillan is ready. I see that the beautiful sun of the West Coast is up and it's nearly full position, which means Sean Moran is ready. And we're going to bring the next episode of the Coast to Coast with you, or to you, with you, whatever, however you want to consume this. But we have this is the last show before UNC basketball actually starts practicing this year, which is weird to say, but let's get some business out of the way before we start talking about the real meat of the show. Want to make sure you guys, if you're listening or if you're watching on YouTube, take a second, go review us. It really does help. I'm not just saying that. The more you rate and review us, the less you'll have to hear me say that, because it does help the algorithm based on where you're getting our audio from, whether it's Apple Play or Google Play or Go Out and Play or wherever you're getting your podcast from. Make sure you take a second to rate and review us. If you don't like the show, hey, shoot us a note. Shoot Ben Sherman a note. Shoot me a note. Shoot Sherrell. Shoot Sean. Just let us know, because we want to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can and giving you guys the quality content that you're here for and that you've come to expect out of Inside Carolina. We also want to make sure we say thanks to Johnny T-Shirt for all of their support. JohnnyT-shirt.com. Hey, I looked outside. I took a little trip with a fam to the mountains this week. The leaves are changing, which means it's going to start getting cold. And my wife is a sweatshirt queen. Like the day that it gets under 70, it's like, oh, God, I need a sweatshirt. Well, Johnny T-Shirt's got your sweatshirts, y'all. Be sure you check them out. They've got all the Nike gear you want. They got any brand, any label that you can think of. They've got all the official stuff. They got all the official jerseys. That's your headquarters if you want to get UNC gear. So be sure to check them out. JohnnyT-shirt.com. They're a family-owned business. They have been longtime supporters of not only the Tar Heels, but of Inside Carolina, and they support this podcast, so make sure you give them some love. And I think that's all we got before we actually start rolling today. Boys, I'll go first just with a temperature check. Sean, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. I've been able to dive into some of the college basketball preview magazines, and some of the content is starting to, from other sites, is starting to increase. So it's good to hopefully be back pretty soon.
Well, you've got that Werewolf of London hair. It's perfect. So I want to give a big shout out to that. Sherrell rocking his Jordan Brand Charlotte Hornets gear. Real, how you feeling, man?
Going for the record for consecutive appearances with the Jordan Brand shirt on. So I think this is like 12. I'm going to try
12, all right.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep it going. Yeah, I'm going to try and keep it going.
Add that to the show notes so that we can be sure that we cover that for next week. Fellas, the last couple of weeks, we actually did see a couple of dominoes fall. To what degree they may affect UNC depends on how much you believe the hype that you see out there. Sherrell, we saw two of those come off the board officially this week. Do you want to talk about those guys?
Yeah, so Caleb Houston, who is depending upon who you ask, kind of a combo small forward, power forward from Mount Verde Academy, played a little with Day'Ron Sharp last year, actually was a roommate of Day'Ron Sharp, eliminated UNC. He's down to a Final Four of Michigan, Duke, Alabama, and Virginia. So those are the four he's decided to kind of move forward with. And then Jabari Smith, our favorite topic on this podcast. And we just always dismissively like, oh, Jabari Smith. Yeah, whatever.
We can still talk about him, right?
Yeah. He committed to Auburn, keeping that kind of Atlanta to Auburn pipeline going. Sharif Cooper, who's going to be their point guard this year, is a part of that. Isaac Okoro, who's going to be a lottery pick, is a part of that. So Bruce Pearl really has the Atlanta to Auburn thing, going strong. So those were the dominoes that fell this past week or this past couple of weeks. And, like we said with Smith, I don't really think Carolina was really ever a real consideration for him. It was an offer that UNC had to make, but Auburn, most people thought led for quite some time. And, with him, there's still a chance that in the spring, depending upon what the G League decides to do, that he takes that route.
That was my question is he really a college prospect?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, he says he is, and everyone around him says they are, but that how that goes. You are until you aren't.
Right.
And so Caleb Houston, I think his recruitment was a little more mysterious. I do wonder just if North Carolina had too many bodies for him, considering Puff Johnson and Kerwin Walton are incoming freshmen. And then you have Leaky Black, who will presumably be back for his senior season.
Yeah.
And then even role-wise, DeMarco Dunn is a commitment they just got. So they have a lot of bodies in that 2 through 4 range. I just wonder if he just thought it was too full.
Yeah, I've got to say too, his list, the 4 that that he's cut it down to, excluding North Carolina, that's a weird amalgamation of schools. I mean, they all have some national panache behind them, but I don't know that I've ever seen those 4 together. Sean, you got anything you want to share about Houston or our favorite target, Jabari Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jabari was always a long shot. Really fun guy to watch. As you alluded to, if he makes it to Auburn, I think that's a toss-up at best. Caleb Houston, not having been in depth as Sherrell and his recruitment, I was a little surprised, especially with UVA making it over UNC, just given that he was the first offer in the 2022 class when he was still in that one before reclassing, and that they were on him pretty early. Dayron Sharp had been at Montverde, so I thought there was a little more connection there than obviously with Jabari. But once again, there are a lot of bodies. I think when we did the fit piece for Houston, I thought it would be a really good fit since he was kind of more of a one and done projected guy where, ideally one of those type of players wouldn't be fully threatened by those bodies that will be at Carolina. But at the same time, the other schools could have a more definitive pathway to him playing. But once again, I think, both of them are tall and can shoot, and would have been nice to see them in Carolina blue. But I think I was a little more surprised with Houston than I was Jabari.
Noted. I appreciate that. And one of the things that we saw recently, and some numbers that popped up, 26 of 100, or 26 of the top 100 kids remain uncommitted. And that's just like everything else that we've talked about on this podcast for the last 3 months. That's so weird to me. Sean, how do you feel about seeing that number of, a full quarter of the top 100 kids being uncommitted?
Yeah, I mean, it would be good to kind of compare it to previous years just to see the difference. And usually, I think that there's a time warp of where everything still feels like you're in the same time. But knowing that, in October with Midnight Madnesses occurring, all the visits to football games that normally a lot of people are committing right around this time frame. But when you hear the 26, and once again, UNC has two of the players that are committed, but there's only 26 left out of that top 100 is a little scary if you're trying to land 1 or 2 more. That being said, with the lack of evaluations over the spring and summer, there could easily be some guys in that, post 100 that could be fits. But once again, as we've talked about a few times, as people keep on committing that have been on the offered list, everything's shrinking. So now you're down to, I think, 4 players that have offers with, maybe some of those being really Salas and Kaufman being a little more realistic than definitely Holmgren and maybe a little bit in Baldwin. So
let's segue to that, and Sherrell, I'll throw it to you. Any updates about Kaufman specifically? I saw that you had a mention of him in your scoop, which goes up on the Inside Carolina Premium Basketball board every Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how you feel. And by the way, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're not a premium subscriber, just make it happen, please. It'll make us all happier. But Sherrell, do you have any nuggets that you'd like to share with us about maybe a Trey Kaufman or anybody else? I know Salas has punted until theoretically probably spring, but do you have anything you want to share with us about Kaufman at all?
I know it's pretty quiet with him. I think he has enough information to make a decision, and I think he and his family, just from talking to folks who are around them or who know them well, I think he and his family are ready to kind of, or I should say, I wouldn't say ready to get over with, but they're tired of answering the questions and kind of tiring of the process in general. So I think something could happen with him at any time. I think a spring decision at one point was more likely than not for him, just because when you've got his pedigree and there's, only 26 players in the top 100 left, and then you start talking about big men, you can just wait around and you can probably get maybe, I don't want to say a better offer, but you have a lot more options. If you wait, you become more coveted that way. But I do think right now he's just kind of in kind of that in between where like I could make a decision, but maybe I want to see what it looks like when the season starts and how guys are playing and how they're using their bigs and all that stuff. As far as Salas is concerned, nothing particularly new. It seems based upon chatter that it's starting to head in a direction that's not favorable for UNC. But I do think if he continues to hold out into the spring, nothing. There's no bigger elixir for problems for UNC than an official visit. And if they can just get him on campus for an official visit, who knows what happens. But without that, if you can just go to Inside Carolina and kind of, look at some of the stuff on the crystal ball and all that, it seems to be trending away from UNC, but I'm not ready to say 100% that it's going to. There's still a little guesswork in there. But North Carolina definitely is being challenged by Kentucky. I haven't found anyone who has said that another school outside of Kansas or excuse me, outside of Kentucky or North Carolina really, really has a great shot with him.
That's good info, and appreciate you kind of keeping us up to date there. And Sean, I know you actually got a chance to see some at least relatively recent footage of Hunter Salas and had a chance to kind of break that down. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I was actually still for the fit, have a few more 2022, so I was trying to watch more for Mark Mitchell, but I ended up going through and found a game in August, Mitchell's team versus Salas's team. I think they matched up a few times throughout the course of the summer, but was able to watch the full game, and he probably had 18, 20 plus points. It was kind of interesting watching him because we always talk about him playing, really the 2-1, the combo guard spot, which I think he can. He probably spent 95% of the time on the wing, so not really handling the ball in that particular game, which it was similar to some of the high school games I've seen. I think one of the biggest concerns with him was his three-point shot, which at least from this one game looked like he had worked on, especially compared to his high school game. And then the other thing when watching, he was pretty, like, even though he had 18 or 20, he wasn't really, dominant like you would really expect a 5-star to be. There were at times kind of these very explosive athletic plays. One was a dunk from the right side, and the other was kind of an up and under layup where you just say, wow, that kid is, really long, really athletic. But there's a lot of other times where he was pretty quiet throughout the game. But once again, he did hit several threes, so his outside shot was looking better. So still a big fan of his game, and we'll still be holding out hope, even though it does seem Kentucky is kind of the leader in the clubhouse. And I'm sure it doesn't help with all the NBA games going on, and Tyler Hero and, Bam and, Jamal Murray previously. So a lot of Kentucky guard discussion that everybody's watching.
And it sounds like, based on what you guys have heard the last few weeks, it is probably going to be many more episodes up until the spring that we can continue to discuss Hunter Salas until he either makes a decision or, if he were to eliminate UNC. Guys, let's switch gears a little bit. I mentioned to open the show, we're 3 days away from practice starting in Chapel Hill, and that does seem surreal to say, but it also seems surreal from the flip side because, it's middle of October. We're used to the guys already having some nuggets coming out and having some really good info about what's developing with the current roster. The first thing I want to throw out there and have you guys kind of speak to, Sean, I'll let you take this one first. It seems as if there may be, on its face, a bit of a logjam for minutes at the 4 and the 5 for UNC, which, knowing where they've been in the past, I feel like I'm kind of throwing caution against the wind by mentioning this, but it does seem like UNC has a good bit of a problem in that they've got bodies, but for how many minutes? How do you think that those minutes might shake out, and how do you think that the coaching staff might allocate who's going to play where?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be one of the more fascinating storylines to see. I mean, you can probably pencil in Garrison Brooks for, 30, 32 minutes or what, more or less, depending on his foul trouble. But with him, you have kind of that steady, solid piece that you know what you're getting. And then it's really going to be kind of the, you know, who comes in and who makes an impact in that first half. That is probably going to be the guy coming in the second half to play next to Brooks. I would imagine Armando would get the nod early on just because of his 1 year of experience. But once again, he didn't have a great year last year by any means. He was strong on the boards, but I think really needed to work on his offensive game. And then you have, Sharp, who once again, seeing him in high school and AAU just continued to improve almost every time out. And he plays super hard. So I think if I had to guess, I'm going to put my money on Sharp. Maybe not at the beginning, but him kind of establishing himself a little quicker. And then I really think Kessler is going to be the intriguing one because he offers more of the inside-outside game than the other two. But is he playing a mix, when Brooks comes out and then kind of swapping between positions? Because once again, depending on who you're playing and who's guarding that 4 spot, that's also going to be a challenge as well. But I think UNC is really the strongest when they have a core 3 bigs that they can count on, where you're starting 2 and then you have that one solid guy that you can just rotate, and those 3 are the ones getting the minutes, versus when you start having 4, then it becomes a little, not as even, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's more of like, all right, let's see who plays well in the first half, and then they get the minutes. So I really like it when it's 3 guys that are the focuses, and that'll probably come as the season goes. And then the question becomes, how does that 4th guy take it if he's kind of, out a little bit more? But once again, there's always injuries, and knock on wood that they don't happen, but it will be nice to have depth in that position, especially when it comes to very talented players.
Yeah. Sherrell, I'll kick this to you. I know that you and I have had this conversation many times over the years. Is this going to be one of the situations where the guy that runs and plays defense the most in practice ends up getting those minutes? Because I'll be honest, Sean alluded to it. I don't know how they take Garrison Brooks off the floor if he's not in foul trouble.
Yeah, I think part of it is too for Garrison. So to address that, I think he would be the first to admit, and I think the staff would be the first to admit, that because he played so many minutes, the most minutes by most minutes by someone not named Marcus Page in like 10 years.
Right.
And he was like 35.2 or something like that. They would say that, yeah, his defense slipped a little bit just because he had such a massive burden offensively.
Yeah.
So while I think he's an excellent player, I think, you're kind of saying to yourself, do I need 35 minutes of him at 90% or 85% or 30 minutes of him at 100%?
Yeah.
I think they would answer the latter. So I think his minutes, I wouldn't be surprised if his minutes are going to go down. It's just a matter of how much. I think 30, 31 sounds about right for him. It's obviously game to game. But I think that'll make him become, back to the top tier defender he was, because there was some slippage there. And it was just because he was tired. He was having to do so much. So I think that's
that his usage will stay up even if they cut that number, cut those minutes back. Do you still think his usage rate will still be as high?
That's tough. That's tough, man.
That's why we're here, man.
Yeah. I'll say no, just because it reminds me of Luke May coming back for his senior season. Everyone was like, yeah, it'll be great for Luke May. He's an All-American, but he shouldn't have to average what he did last year because, they won't need him because they'll have some reinforcements. Cam Johnson got healthy. Kobe White came in. Nasir Little came in. Garrison Brooks, improved. So I think it'll be fairly similar for Garrison Brooks as it was Luke May's senior year, in that he'll be just as good of a player, but his numbers won't be nearly as good as they were last year. I think just as far as the rotation, man, they have 80 minutes, and they're going to make sure that those 80 minutes are filled with people who are running up and down the court, playing defense, who are energized. To bring up stuff we talked about before, you're going to have to be a self-starter in this kind of environment with no fans and everything. So if you were someone who can't, kind of get up for a game yourself, I don't know. I think that's going to hurt you if you're that type of player. If you're someone who feeds off of the crowd, who doesn't have that internal thing, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just some people have it and some don't. I think that's going to hurt you as well. So, it really is a situation where the bench is the greatest motivator, that whole thing. And Roy Williams, we talked about it. He would look over last year and be like, who am I going to put in for Garrison Brooks? There's not really anyone
I can't
I feel
bench anybody
comfortable
because
right.
there's no other bodies.
Right. There's not anyone I feel comfortable with, or everybody's hurt. So this year that shouldn't be the case. So I think those are a couple of things to look for. And then, going back to 2017, because I get 2017 post vibes just because it was the last time they had 4 viable post players. If you go back to that Kentucky Elite Eight game, one of our favorite games, everybody loves that game. I don't think I realized it until we did the throwback. Shout out Joey, that Isaiah Hicks didn't play nearly as much as I remembered. Yep. And Greg Barnes was like, yeah, Roy decided to go with Luke May because he was hot. I think it'll be a situation like that where, maybe it's a game where Armando Bacot is playing better than Sharp and they'll roll with Sharp. Maybe there's a game where Walker Kessler is playing better than everyone else and they'll feed him. It gives them that option. So I think that's what we'll see. I think it'll be the start of the season. It'll be Bacot and Brooks. And then from there, who knows? Those guys are going to battle and practice and make each other better.
I may be contrarian in that, but I always feel like that on Roy Williams' best teams, he's been able to feel who's playing better in the moment and make adjustments like you referenced with Hicks v. May in that Kentucky regional final game in 2017. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, another for Brooks, he was getting about a little over 12 shots a game last year, which actually doesn't sound like a whole lot when you think about everything he was doing. But even though the team was losing last year, he was carrying a big load. I'm sure he would like to lighten the load, but I'm curious from a mental standpoint if he's not getting as many shots or getting the ball as much as he did, how will that kind of go mentally? I don't think that should be a big issue, but once you kind of get used to one thing, it's hard to kind of go back to another thing. I think his efficiency, it definitely decreased from his sophomore to junior year, but it didn't take a big hit, which I think was the most surprising thing, just given how much his minutes went up. But once again, I think it'll be interesting just to see the mix, in terms of now there's more talent around him. So is he able to kind of keep that efficiency high, maybe come down a little bit, but still, there's a lot of high projections for him in terms of, All-American, things like that. So will he feel the pressure to live up to that, or will he be able to get into kind of a good flow with the rest of the team?
Sherrell?
And, he's never, in his years at Carolina, he's never consistently played with a true 5. He's always been a true 5. So I'm curious, after 3 years of kind of being the post guy, how he's going to handle sliding over to the 4, even though he came in with that ability. Like you said, it'll be fun to watch him kind of grow, because he's going to have to grow too. Just like the freshmen are going to have to grow into playing that role, and whether or not, his shots are coming at the rim, or if he's just going to be kind of the mid-range guy. And we've seen him in some of the social media stuff, stepping out and taking threes. Is that going to be something that's actually happens in the game, or is that just more, something he's just working on to work on? So just a lot of questions.
That's been my Easter egg in every single run and shoot, or whatever you want to scrimmage video that the official UNC basketball social media accounts have put out. My Easter egg has always been every single one of them has included Garrison Brooks stepping outside for a jump shot, which okay. To your point, Real, maybe that's what he's been challenged with in the offseason. Maybe that's the adaptation that they think he needs to make just as much, in different ways that they're expecting out of the freshmen. And speaking of those freshmen, guys, is it possible that we see a lot of RJ Davis and Caleb Love playing together early this year? Sherrell, what do you feel about that? I feel like, there's kind of been some mysticism around it, and people kind of being curious of, Anthony Harris fits in, Andrew Platek fits in, but how do you feel that's going to play out? Because again, practice starts in 3 days.
Well, I can say, talking to folks, they love RJ, which I guess isn't terribly surprising. I've been a little bit surprised how much we've heard it kind of from people who've been around kind of the rumor mill back channel. It's been surprising how much we heard it. I guess they will play. They're going to have to play some together regardless. Whether, I think what we're talking about is as a starting unit. And, to me, I would think that Anthony Harris has a leg up just because of some of the things he did last year to kind of be the starting 2. But as we've said, with this season, use whatever word you want to. Like, all bets are off, literally, with this season, because they're just not going to let 14 and 19 or whatever it was happen again. And if it takes starting 5 freshmen, if it takes starting 5 walk-ons, if it takes starting 4 bigs, they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they have a good season and rebound. When I say rebound, get better, not actually rebound, but also rebound.
I was going to say, Lloyd Williams is always big on the rebounds post game too. I think it's the first number he
yeah.
looks at.
So to answer your question, yeah, I think we'll see it. I just, I don't know about it as a starting unit, but I think we'll see it. It could be a starting unit. And I think Sean has a good idea of kind of how it would work with Caleb and RJ, both really good scorers, both can push tempo.
Sean, can I hear how you feel like that's gonna play out in the real world, specifically with the nuances of their game and how they would complement each other, but also what each of them individually brings to the table? Because I think that's something that you guys have really done a good job in sharing with our listeners, our subscribers, when they were coming in, how, yeah, they play similar positions, but they're not the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again with Harris, I know he's had a miraculous recovery, but there's still a question mark of how is he going to hold up. But when you look at the two of them, I do think their games complement each other. And I know we've always talked about really Caleb Love being the point guard, but it'll be interesting to see who's the one that, and maybe it's both of them, 50-50, 40-60, whatever it is, in terms of who's handling the ball more. You have Caleb Love that, going back to his high school in AAU, kind of was transitioning into that point guard role, and is 6'3", taller, stronger, a little more athletic, more of, like, I'd say, an NBA point guard, where you watch his games and he's very content, more just kind of bringing the ball up the court at his pace, operating in the pick and roll, very left-hand dominant. So he loves to use the pick and roll, go left. And once again, with his strength and size, he can get to that rim and finish, or hit a floater. And his shot definitely has improved. It still, I think, needs a little more consistency, but he's comfortable from kind of the new college 3-point line to the NBA 3-point line. So he does have that comfortability. And then you have RJ Davis, who smaller, a little quicker. In AAU, he played with the ball in his hands a lot, and he was always trying to push the ball up, really as much as he could. So he's going to fit in seamlessly in terms of the up-tempo offense. In terms of him playing off the ball, he could definitely do that a little more, I'd say, slithery, in terms of he loves, like, the 1-2 dribble combos, either to free himself up, side to side for a 3-point shot, or maybe get a step on the defender. And once again, with his size, he was good at getting to the line. I think that could be a little more of a challenge for him in college, but he did have a good floater mid-range game. But once again, he can catch and shoot from deep as well. So I think really, as they both get adjusted to each other, I think they do complement each other well in terms of what their strengths are. And once again, they're both wired to score, but they're both also have the ability and are good passers, so they're able to look for each other and their teammates also.
I'm going to go ahead and go on the record here, and I'm not going to fan out, but I will say that I am an absolute stan for RJ Davis's game. Just having seen some of his video and reading some of the stuff that I've read about him, he's got some dog in him. And Sherrell knows this, because that's probably my favorite trait in all basketball players is, if he's a dog, I am a fan. And it seems like RJ has some dog about him, and I'm excited to see how he develops, specifically with what lineup UNC decides to trot out. Sherrell, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think we went up there to New York, to White Plains, to watch him play back before everything happened. It was actually the last trip I took before
in the
all
before
this.
times.
Yeah, in the before times, back in December. And we watched him play a season opener, and we talked to coaches and players, and there were a couple other teachers that were there who we talked to, and to a T, they all talked about how tough he was, and they talked about how in Stepanak, Archbishop Stepanak is where he went to school. It wasn't a program known for being really good at basketball. They've had a few good players, but nothing on the level of somebody's going to North Carolina. And his coach basically said, yeah, when he decided to come here, that was all we needed. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, the guy just put the entire program on his back. And, we went from a, well-known Catholic school in New York to kind of a school that everyone knew around the country when it came to high school basketball.
Mm.
And all of that was because of RJ Davis. About, it's cliche stuff, but about how he would stay after games and shoot till 11 or 12 in the morning. About how after those games where he stayed until 11 or 12, he would be there the next morning at 6:30, ready to get more shots up, and just how hard he worked because he felt like, with his size deficiency, he's 5'11", maybe. With that deficiency, or I shouldn't say deficiency, with that limitation, he was going to have to overcome a lot because, being a 5'11" basketball player when everyone else is, 6'5", 6'7", is very hard. And so he had to learn how to, as Sean said, a floater, how to finish through contact, how to be shifty, and how to use his first step to get by defenders and all those things. And just to a T, though, everyone talked about his work ethic, how hard of a player he is, and how he just put the program on his back and made it a national, basketball kind of powerhouse.
Boy, does that sound like anybody that Roy Williams has liked before?
Oh, you got me. Who?
I'm just any litany of point guards that he has fawned over the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, they've all had those kind of qualities that you just listed out. They're tough. They're really aggressive. They're really willing to kind of take the team on their back. And that's independent of, scoring ability. That's just like a mindset that I think, Roy's always quick to. How many guys has he called a tough little nut over the last 10 years, right? I mean, how many guards has he given that moniker to? And I think that this sounds, everything that you two just said about RJ Davis to me sounds like he might be prepping us for something. Sean, anything else you want to contribute about just the guard situation and what you think playing time might look like? Or if we just want to continue to stand for RJ Davis, I'll allow
it. Well, I think, once again, going back to who's pushing the ball at the court, who's the primary ball handler, and at UNC, even with Barry and Page, it was always really one guy, more or less. Going back to Kansas, it seemed like it was, kind of either or. But, when you had Kobe White, UNC was playing at its fastest tempo. Kobe, the question for Kobe was he, and I had the same question, was he going to be able to adapt to, going from a scorer to a true lead guard? And he pushed the pace like we hadn't seen really since Lawson. Last year with Cole, no discredit to him, but he was a little more comfortable. He would push it, but he didn't nearly push it like Kobe did or anybody else. So the tempo went down. RJ, once again, as I mentioned, he loves to push. If he's the one handling the ball, I think UNC gets right back in that top 10, 20 tempo rankings. If it's Love, it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll definitely increase from last year, but will it reach that upper echelon? We always talk about offense. Defensively, and this is kind of why projecting forward, assuming Caleb Love is a one and done, and why we've talked about Hunter Salas or somebody like him, where you play two guards and now you have kind of a taller defender that might be able to help out RJ a little bit, because once again, at 5'11", if that teams are going to try to attack him if they're bigger, and if you have two sub 5'11" guards, it's going to be very easy to attack. But with Caleb Love, his size and strength, you can switch a little better, and you can put him on. If a team has another 6'2", 6'3" shooting guard scorer, he could probably go on him more than Davis. So once again, I think you'll be able to see a lot of versatility and a lot of switchability, just given the different sizes, strength, and length of the two.
All right, fellas. Well, that gives us something to look forward to, at least for subscribers and listeners of this podcast, knowing that practice starts again officially this week. So be sure to stay locked in on InsideCarolina.com to hear more about that. I'm sure both of you guys will have some content come in relatively quickly once we start having the media days and start getting a little bit more contact in an official capacity. But it's going to be fun to watch, like you guys both mentioned, how the post player minutes are doled out, and then also how these two young guys handle the guard position, how that fits. And Anything else you guys want to throw in before we wrap the show today?
I had something, and it's not necessarily basketball related, but it goes back to the Johnny T-shirt read. Like I can't stress enough to folks how important it is to support a place like Johnny T-shirt. When you go to Franklin Street, and for those of us who went to Carolina or who have grown up going to Chapel Hill, it seems like every time you go, something you knew is gone. It's like this place is gone, and this had to close, and
it hurts, man.
it hurts. And so there aren't many of those places left. And Johnny T-shirt is one of those places I've literally gone to for the last 25 years. Like when my brother was in college, my uncles were in college, we would always go to Johnny T-shirt. That was the stop. So I would just implore folks, like, support them. They support us, locally owned, alumni. Like, let's not let another Chapel Hill institution go by the wayside.
Not on my watch.
Yeah.
Not on my watch. And real talk, to Real's point, that was the first Carolina store that I went to when I took my visit to UNC many, many, many moons ago. They still had stores then. It was really awesome. But yeah, make sure you guys hit up Johnny T-shirt. Thanks for bringing that up, Real. Patronize them however you can. JohnnyT-shirt.com. They can get the quick shipment out to you. They process stuff so quickly. It's amazing. Or they can deliver it to your doors. You can just kind of pull up there on the street there on Franklin. They can actually run it out to you. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that they want to take care of Inside Carolina subscribers. Make sure if you're a premium content subscriber that you use your coupon code, get that extra 10% off. And that's on top of a sale. They have some stuff on sale. You throw an extra 10 on top of that. We're saving you money upon money upon money. And it's because we like our subscribers and our listeners and our viewers if you're checking us out on YouTube. So once again, guys, take some time to rate us, review us. We appreciate you listening to this episode. Boys, anything before we put a bow on this one?
No.
All right.
All
For
good.
Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, I'm Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. We'll catch you next time. Late.